By the end of today's episode, you'll know some mindset shifts and on-set habits that can help you go from unknown to booking recurring roles on major shows. Welcome to the Actor's Career Compass, where we help aspiring screen actors find high-quality auditions, sign with great agents, and book major roles in legit productions. I'm your host, Martin Benson, and today I'm interviewing actor and coach George Gallagher. Some of the things we'll be covering include the first career steps that helped George land his very first union speaking role, the biggest mistakes many actors make in auditions and how to avoid them, and some powerful advice George gives every student to help them book more work. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, pause the video for just a minute and drop a comment below sharing the biggest mistake that you think actors make in auditions. I'm gonna be personally reading all of the comments that come in, and I'll respond to as many as I can. George Gallagher appears as Lorenzo in the season 2 premiere of Taylor Sheridan's 1923 and in Netflix's The 6888 alongside Kerry Washington. His credits include a recurring guest star role in BET Plus's Perimeter, All the Queen's Men, leading parts in A Heart for Christmas, which is on Amazon Prime, and a featured role in the upcoming thriller The Block. George also leads the Actors Instinct, which is a virtual coaching academy known for its intuitive, instinct-driven approach to actor training. Thanks so much for joining me, George. I'm excited to chat today.
Yeah, likewise, Martin. I'm excited to be here.
All right. So we've known each other for a bit. You offer some amazing acting coaching services and a training program. I've heard a lot of good things from some of the actors who I've referred over to you. So I'm excited to have the opportunity to talk about, some specific questions on how actors can improve themselves, your own career, and also how actors can work with you if they're interested in that. So start off by telling us a little bit about your journey. Where are you now, and what did you do to actually land that first union speaking role, which is a big goal a lot of actors have?
Yeah, so you got it. That's a great question, Martin. My journey has been an exciting one, but certainly had its share of highs and lows and kind of windy roads. And I think over the course of time, you start to see what's kicking and what's sticking, what are successful actions that really produce momentum and results, and other things that maybe aren't quite as useful. They said that the golden rule of Hollywood was that out of every 20 auditions, an actor would have expected to book at least one job. I like to say in my school, out of 10, you should get at least 2 that you feel like you're getting some noise from. You're getting a feedback that you are pinned or on a veil for the job, or you have a booking, which is 20%. Above industry standards. In the age of self-tapes, it's probably a lot less. I think they're seeing a lot more people now. They also would say that the trajectory of most actors' careers, it really is a marathon and not a sprint. There are some people who unquestionably come out the gate running and charging, and it's like they step off the plane in Los Angeles to New York and get a pilot, or end up on Broadway. And I've known plenty of actors that's been the case for. But for most actors, that's not the trajectory. For most actors, it's about the long haul. And it's about building a skill set, a network, relationships, and a career, brick by brick, step by step. And, the old saying, it can take 20 years to be an overnight success. That's, very true for many, many actors, or to at least get established in a meaningful way, meaning that you're a working actor. For me, my first union speaking role came coincidentally during the time of, truthfully, during a strike. And it was through a commercial. And, at the time I had already gone to drama school and had my degree in theater, but really learned nothing about how to administer a career or to audition. Mm-hmm. And it was theater, it was classical acting training, stuff that didn't really apply, I'd say, to film and television. And, they had a strike going on. And so I wouldn't get great commercial auditions. But because of the strike, they were seeing a lot of people that were non-union for things that they wouldn't have otherwise. And it became very evident to me early on that, the union was an important thing. And I didn't want to be a scab, one of those people who crosses a picket line during a union strike.
Mhm.
And so a very big contract was offered to me for a major product, a Procter and Gamble Fortune 500 company to do a big campaign for them. And I had heard they were doing some sort of agreements that SAG had kind of signed off on. Well, anyway, make a long story short, I had met with, at the time, a commercial agent at a very prestigious agency. It was called Paradigm. It's still around, and in New York. And I had told them my situation, and one of their clients was a union rep. And they had basically said that, if I turned the commercial down, I basically would end up in SAG. So that was my first principal speaking role. And that led shortly thereafter to me getting a recurring stint on The Guiding Light on CBS, which was a daytime soap opera. So like by kind of choosing the ethical path, I got my SAG card. I got my first speaking role on a daytime soap opera and television,
Wait,
and
can we go back just a tiny bit? So you turned down this large commercial role
yeah.
because of the whole situation with SAG, but what actually gave you the SAG card?
Well, so in exchange for turning down the commercial, I was awarded a SAG card by the president of SAG at the time.
Okay, how did you like meet this person, or
So what happened? So first of all, they don't like when you're the guy, when you are the person. Just know actors. Thousands of people have gone through auditions and however many dozens of callbacks. A lot of time is already invested to get to the point where they're ready to offer you a job. It's not uncommon that they will go to great lengths to keep you in that job. It was one of the biggest commercial production houses in America. They really wanted me. The producers, ad executives, everybody wanted me. They were trying to figure out every which way but Sunday to get me into the project, and they couldn't do it. And I stuck to my guns, and they were not happy with me. But as a result, SAG recognized sort of my dedication. What they wanted me to do, Martin, was they wanted me to go to the fitting, and they wanted me to basically tell them where they were shooting, and what they would do is show up and pick it. I didn't want to do that because that's going to cost the ad companies thousands, tens of thousands of dollars for the day. I'm going to burn them. They have to replace an actor last minute. They might lose half a day on it. Plus, they've got all these people making noise on set. They were nice enough to hire me. I figured I would be nice enough to not throw them under the bus. But at the same time, I didn't want to sign off and condone on what they were doing. So I told SAG, I won't do that. But what I will do is I will turn the commercial down. I will call production, and you can listen to me on the phone. If you don't believe there's another person on the end of that phone and that this was a real offer, then you should give me my card. Then we walk away. But if you do, then that means I'm a good enough actor to be in the union anyway. So give me my card. And so the director of SAG said, all right, I like the chutzpah. So I picked up the phone, called my agent, called the production company, walked away from it, and he goes, all right, welcome to the union. And I paid my initiation fee and I joined. But that enabled me, not only did it get me on as a client because I was helped through a commercial agency that made me attractive to that agency because they knew I booked a national campaign for this product. I had already come in through a referral, which is another conversation. And then it also got me on the roster for other things, which led to me being on Guiding Light. And so, I guess the sort of moral of the story is you want to be ethical, but you want to be smart. You want to have integrity and support your union because without it, actors, we don't get paid our fair share. It's really important. But at the same time, you have to make sure that you operate and conduct yourself with some integrity with the people that you're doing business with as well. I didn't feel it would be an ethical thing for me to show up on set or give them the address for my, what do you call it, the fitting and all that. Then they're paying me and I'm wasting everybody's time, money, and energy. And it's just, I thought it was a dirtbag sort of way to operate. It would have been good, yes, overall, probably for the union, but I would have burned a lot of bridges personally with that advertising company, with the casting office and the production company. And don't think I didn't get an earful from the casting director for turning it down either at the 11th, not the 11th hour, but even after going through, because they'd already invested a lot of time. And we had numerous auditions, by the way. I probably had to audition 4 or 5 times for the spot. Which in the world of commercials, if you're a union actor, I think anything after one callback, they have to pay you for your auditions. In non-union, that's not uncommon, or at least it wasn't in those days. But so it was an unorthodox way to get into the union. And it was a somewhat interesting, unorthodox way that I got into the onto the soap opera. In New York City, there were at that time, I don't know what it is now. There's probably not, I don't know if there's anything. I think it's only in Los Angeles they're shooting soaps. But at the time, there were 4 soaps. And again, I was lucky enough to get something on that, and that led to other things for me.
Awesome. That's crazy. So really, it is about sort of thinking outside of the box and how can I'm not just going to turn this down, but I'm going to make sure that the right people are aware of what's happening and make sure that it works in my benefit.
Yeah, everything, and you're really good. I know at this, Martin. Every opportunity that you have, it is a business. So you're an artist who's booking jobs, and you have to go and deliver your product and do all the stuff that I teach and be free and be instinctive. But you also have to understand how to sell, and you have to understand something about leverage, and you have to know why they need you and why they don't, if they can replace you, and how easy that is, how this all works in the grand scheme of things, so that you can negotiate to get the best deal that you possibly can. And I still believe ultimately it's not about, let me get the best deal and, leave them with their pockets empty. I saw a documentary on the great film producer Jerry Weintraub, who did the Karate Kid films and a gazillion other things. And, Matt Damon and Brad Pitt and George Clooney, and he did the Ocean's 11 movies also. And they all said, like, he would tell Clooney, hey, Brad Pitt and Damon are in. Are you going to do it? All right, well, if they're in, I'm in. And they say, hey, and none of them wanted to do the film. And he kept telling each one of them, the other guys they've signed on the dotted line. It's a done deal. Are you in? And so then they decided to do it. And then they all got there and got a little pissed off but they were happy to be there and they did a great job. But Weintraub said in every deal, both parties need to go away feeling like amazing about the deal. They have to feel like the exchange is fully in abundance, and they're really happy about it. They shouldn't feel like, oh, I got the best bargain basement prices ever, and like I left the guy bleeding, or I took the customer to the bank and then some, and let me go cash that check. And the only time they smile is when the credit card clears. If that's the business transaction, that is not going to inspire customers and clients and people to hire you, and that is not going to equal a career. That's people can smell that, coming down from a million miles away. So I think it's important for everyone to understand that, like, I really believe that, fundamentally a good transaction leaves both parties feeling super excited and pumped to do something and go forward. Like it's a win-win, 100%. It never has to be this idea in the business world that, well, that's business and I'm going to cut somebody under and you get screwed on your first deal. No, it doesn't have to be that way.
That's how the economy should work. That's why things keep moving forward. And
Right.
It's not kind of like, a zero-sum game,
Correct.
I love that. So one of my questions now is kind of a little bit related to what we've been talking about, because there's negotiation involved and thinking about things from the strategic standpoint when it comes to your, the career side of things. But beyond, or maybe this is the same thing that we've already talked about, but what would you say have been a couple of the biggest sort of challenges that you've had to overcome in your acting career, and how did you do it?
Truthfully, the biggest challenge I think I faced was I did not fully understand the audition process. I touched on that earlier before. My teacher was extraordinary. His name was Harold Guskin. Taught some of the greats. Glenn Close, only person she ever studied acting with, Kevin Kline, James Gandolfini for 35 years. I could drop names, from here to tomorrow. Really creme de la creme artists. I mean, like Daniel Craig, Rachel Weisz, like creme de la creme. For me, I really learned about process and how to work as an actor. But when it came to approaching the audition, Harold's not in the audition with you. Wynn Handman, who I also studied, was brilliant, is not in the audition room with you. You have to go in there and it's just you and the script and them, and you have a finite amount of time. And the pressure of that can be a lot for an actor, especially once they start signing contracts and seeing how much money they're going to make. And if you go from, let's say, negotiating relative poverty to signing 6-figure deals and things like that, that can really weigh on you when you're an actor going in a room with 20 suits and having to read for a part. And so understanding how to focus and concentrate and sustain that without thinking about the external results or the pressure or the judgment or the eyes, or even it could be a casting director who's your scene partner, but also is judging you while you're reading with them. So they're not playing the scene with you and like, hey, how you doing? Good. I'm glad you could come out today. So I'm thinking, about this little coffee we're going to have today. It's not a scene partner who's playing with you in the cafe. It's hi, how are you doing? So I'm thinking about, the coffee we're going to have and this little speed date that we're on. And you see them watching you and analyzing you, and like the wheels turn, and they're kind of getting a read on you and seeing what makes you tick while they're your scene partner, which no scene study class will ever prepare you for. Most of the time, even in audition technique and prep classes, you're reading with another actor. Now, some cast directors will have a reader with you who's an actor, and that makes things a lot easier. But in general, you have to respond in a way that's somewhat to a very unnatural circumstance. So it's about an audition in many ways is the most unreal environment you will ever be in as an actor. It's, I think, 1,000 times easier on a film set, especially if you've got, great carpenters and teamsters and everybody's building something that looks real, or you're on stage, even doing black box theater. It's not, you don't have those distractions to deal with. So, it for me, really understanding some basic elements on how to apply what I learned about how to use my instinct and my intuition to stay free and not lose that once you get into a high pressure situation or a live audition, or even what was to come soon thereafter, which was the self-tape, which I in some ways prefer. And we'll talk maybe a little bit about that today, but they both are different animals and have different pros and cons. And understanding, I train actors to be malleable, to be flexible and ready for anything. That means working with multiple directors that might have different concepts and visions or even beliefs about certain things with your character or the story, or even your acting process. And how do you come in and sustain your instincts and your intuition without getting lost into the screen directions that are on that page or with the notes? You know what I mean?
Well, that leads into this next question. And since you mentioned it, we can definitely talk both about self-tape side and essentially like in-person audition side. But what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see actors making in their performances or auditions, and why are those mistakes problematic?
So the biggest takeaway that I have from self-taping, both for myself and with clients who frankly were doing better than I was early on when I started coaching. Then I started being able to actually practice what I was preaching and applying it. Was it felt like an actor standing on a mark, working with a reader and doing a tape, showing us that they could be emotional and get certain basic elements of the story. But I didn't believe they could walk on set tomorrow and do this part. You know, I was working with a bi-coastal talent management company that some of their clients I would coach. And I remember the series regulars that they had, and the people who were continually getting callbacks and bookings and pins and avail checks for series regular type roles. When I would watch their tapes, if she was a secretary typing or a receptionist in the office, it was impossible for me not to believe she's really the typewriter, she's really typing, she's really talking to the boss on the phone. And when somebody walks in over here, on camera left, they're walking in, she's dealing with them, and then there's some other problem on camera right that she's got her eye on. Everything in space really existed. So there was a client they had whose wife, I think, was an actress also, and this guy had been a series regular, I don't recall his name, but he came in like a 1950s zoot suit. He was playing a gangster. He wore a full-on zoot suit, and she would run around in 4 or 5 different places behind camera so that it felt like he was in a scene with 4 or 5 people. And it was kind of like what I heard Wesley Snipes say about John Leguizamo's one-man shows on Broadway that he did, like Freak. And anyway, it's impossible to not believe he was in a room with 5 other actors playing the scene as if he was on set. It was just his wife. He believed each one of those people were there in space, and he made me believe it. And the simplicity of this game is really about belief, suspension of disbelief. As a filmmaker, I'm sure that's what you are looking for. Is, can the audience really believe this? I read a great your newsletter, I think it was this morning, about why it's problematic for actors to spike the camera, because it kills suspension of disbelief that we're seeing an actor in a movie or on a screen, and they're like talking, breaking the fourth wall and talking to the audience. And it's like, that can be for a purpose that could be effective, but if the actor's doing that through the whole self-tape, like that's another thing. So, and understanding how sensitive the camera is, like eyeline, actors take that for granted. Like the difference between me looking at you and me looking at you is a lot, or me looking at you. or me looking at you, or me looking at you. I have actors that do tapes and they're readers here, and it's like the whole thing's in profile. So I don't see this eye at all. So I'm losing half of the nuance and subtly. I can't see their soul. I can't see what they're thinking. Another big mistake that I think actors make is they treat film acting as only being from the neck up because it is in this frame,
Yeah.
but their body stops living underneath the neck. And that registers in your eyes. They look like a talking head. And you can watch and you can see they're not even breathing sometimes. They'll hold their breath. They're not in their body. They're not wearing, brilliant actors, they'll wear the shoes of the character. They don't come out in their, excuse my language, in their freaking underwear for their self-tape and then have a suit with the tie on top, and then you see them get up and you see their ass as they walk away. Like there were actors during the pandemic that were doing this shit all the time. And so the guy who gets the job, I believe he's got the shoes on, they're polished, decked to the nines, he's got the Rolex, and he has probably, something in his pocket that belongs to the character. Those little things, it's like knowing that as an actor gives you a secret. And I think that registers in the tape. There's a confidence and something that really makes an artist. So they're not just seeing an audition, they're seeing an acting. They're seeing a tiny piece of art that tells a story. And actors take a lot of these things for granted because they're rushing to get it in by the deadline, or they're told they got to turn in their tapes and castings watch them on a rolling basis, or they don't have a reader when they need it, or they've got problems with the Wi-Fi, or there's a storm in the area, or their kids are going to come home and they don't have a babysitter and they're worried about noise. I mean, there's a gazillion reasons why, but you guys need to remember it is your time. It is your audition. A coach that works in my program, Jonathan, at the Actors Instinct, I remember him telling me once, and he's been a very successful actor on television, they're getting you for free. And even when he would go into the room to audition, he'd said, listen, they're getting me for free, so they better be appreciative that I'm there, and I better take ownership of that. It is my time too to do my audition and do what I want to do but still be obviously open to feedback and direction and stuff like that. But those are the biggest kind of killers I see. The last one I would say, we talked about camera and believing people are where everything is and really exists in space. Really like immersing yourself physically from the neck down. And then the last thing that I would say is, actors really, they need to not take the notes if they get feedback or they've read the breakdown and get lost into that. There's too many artists that are actors that are thinking about how they want them to do it and to get it right, as opposed to what they have to say. Like, what is your voice? It's your version. Richard Hicks, who used to be the president of the Casting Society of America, a really good casting director in California. I auditioned once for a lead in a film, and tested opposite a big star. I'm not gonna say who was, an actress. And he said to me on the first reading, George, we're not looking for the perfect take. We're looking to get a sense of how you fit the role.
Yeah. It's really funny that you say that, because it reminds me of a story that I told in one of my courses on brand and type. And so I talked about this story, how years ago I was hiring photographers for one of my headshot studios, right? And I posted an ad saying, I'm looking for experienced headshot photographer. You should be funny, tell jokes, make people comfortable, etc., right? And then like every response that I got, people were all like, yeah, I'm funny, I tell jokes, I make people comfortable. And it made it really hard for me to narrow it down. And then once I brought people in, like they were trying to essentially fake what they thought I wanted because of my ad and how I was interacting with them. And so I use this to kind of say that casting directors, that's one reason that casting directors don't give enough information. Like actors often complain like, oh, there's not enough information in the breakdown. It's like, well, they don't want to, because then you're going to try to fake what you think that they want, or they just are open to seeing different things. And so then in that course, I kind of talk about how it's funny how like in a world or in an industry where everything is kind of built on playing other characters, to get booked, you have to sort of be yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
It's
That's really
definitely
good.
I love all of these different tips that you have about how to, really like embody the character. And it kind of, as you were speaking, it sort of made me want to ask whether you have any resources that you recommend for actors in terms of, I'm sure that actors who are new or, haven't had a lot of experience submitting self-tapes would love, is there a place where they can see self-tapes that are done from like really good actors, like to just be like, what does a really good self-tape look like? Do you have any resources or anything that you can recommend on that? Does that even exist?
Um, well, I do have a public group on Facebook and an Instagram page. It's the Actors Instinct on Instagram. I mean, excuse me, on Facebook, and then and sometimes, I do have some self tapes that I've shared there, and I have some videos on there where I talk about some of the hacks and things like that. I've shared some of my own self tapes that have booked and showing you, the script to screen sort of thing. I have a couple of those for the Tyler Perry series I did. I put one together for 1923. I might release soon. Um, Usually, so I do a 90-day virtual conservatory, as you know, and I'll break down auditions, and occasionally I'll, have a day where we'll do self tapes, and then I'll review them in class, and then, I'll have them do it again, sort of as a callback situation, coach them and whatnot. But it's really about process for me. I care more about the actor and their process than about sort of doing it right. They have to know how to audition, but they have to know how to act. Like they have to have the nuts and bolts of what I teach, which is different from what a lot of other people teach. So really the best way for people to get more information, if they're interested and serious about becoming a student and doing a deep dive in training, and they want to do it in an accelerated, kind of virtual program, is to interview for our school and, maybe jump into a program if it ends up being a good fit for them and vice versa. We interview, I take a lot of time with each person to kind of make sure they're a good fit. But those are the best resources that I have. And there's videos I have on YouTube where I talk also about things.
Yeah, so that sort of thing, like, you mentioned the Facebook thing and the YouTube thing or whatever, just if people are interested and you're posting some of these occasionally and they want to see it, and of
Yeah.
course they'll hear more from you and learn more about what you offer, but where can they go to join the Facebook? Can they join the Facebook group if they're not an active student?
So yeah, they can just go to the Actors Instinct on Facebook and just submit a request to join the group, and I'll approve them.
Cool.
Uh, and if they send, I don't know, I think it allows you to send a message if they want to. Certainly, they can mention this podcast, Martin Benson, and whatnot. So, I have
What's the
they're
YouTube
somewhat vetted. I know they're not a bot.
what's the YouTube channel?
So YouTube, if you just go to George Gallagher on YouTube.
We'll try to include links as well in the description of both the video and the audio version of the podcast. So, no, I just wanted to ask that. I know we're going to get your info later on in the episode as
Sure.
well, but I just thought that, hey, if you're posting occasional things and actors can see what a really good one of those like three-dimensional self-tapes looks like, where like you're truly living in the world, that could be really beneficial.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. It's the Actors Instinct also on Instagram. It's just no space. The Actors, ACTORS Instinct.
great.
It's just the Actors Instinct on Instagram, and that's the link. But the Facebook group is also a really good resource.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
So my next question for you is, what do you think is like one of the most valuable pieces of advice that you typically find yourself giving students in some of your classes?
So this came to me via third party. It was from my teacher, and it came through an actor friend of mine who I've collaborated with a bit on projects. And he's referred a number of students to me, an actor named Holt McCallany. And it came from Harold Guskin. We share a mentor and teacher, and I think he was with him many decades before I was. He's a very well accomplished veteran actor. And he told me that early on, Harold said to him, I'm going to give you two pieces of advice, and I think if you take these, you'll find them to be very useful in the course of a career and time. The first one is you have to believe, you have to believe that talent will win out in the end. I think actors are extraordinarily aware of being outside of sort of the loop or the inner circle of what's perceived as Hollywood or the filmmakers' world and television, and that they have to go to the right networking event, or they have to go to the right party, or they have to go right here, all of which you should absolutely do, because you never know what's going to happen. But he said if you want to do that, do it to have a good time because you like putting a suit on or a beautiful dress and meeting people and drinking champagne or having good food, and to have a party and have fun and maybe make a friend. Don't do it because you think you're going to meet someone who's going to say that coat check girl is going to test for the next lead in this Lionsgate film. Those are one in a gazillion opportunities that happen. Being good, everyone wants to get in the in crowd. And he said, being good puts you in. Mm-hmm. Jason Alexander said, more actors come to him asking about how can I get an agent than any other question. Very few ever come and say, how can I be a really, really great actor? Like really great, and care about that. So you have to believe, now you do have to know how to, like we talked to early on, you got to know it is your business. You're an entrepreneur, you're an actor, you own a business. You have to know how to do that. Every successful actor I know is a good business person. Unquestionably, hands down, no exception. And they're intelligent, above average, that they know how to run a business, and that's why they have a career and can sustain it. But you do have to be really, really, really good at what you do and focus on that. And you have to believe that, that you're going to get an opportunity. Orson Welles talked about this, and he would quote Orson Welles that you have to believe you're going to get a chance. But when you get one, Sandy Meisner is famous for saying, you better be ready. Yeah. Because you may only get a few, and the wheel will circle around. You'll get more. So if you have a big loss on some audition you didn't book, or you think you stunk up the room, or you turned in a crappy tape and they don't want to see you again and they're not requesting, like, nothing is irreversible. If Robert Downey Jr. could have the greatest comeback of all time with Iron Man after decades and doing all the stuff and going to prison, anybody can get another chance if they have extraordinary talent, or they're just really, really good and they're earnest and they're ethical and hardworking, So I think actors need to keep that in mind, but also know that there is, in my opinion, and again, this could sound controversial, but I think there's a whole world of antiquated information in regards to training actors that in today's world isn't as effective. The days of doing, endless sense memories, and please don't, the acting gods shouldn't send me to jail or hit me with a harpoon for saying that, in the memory of Lee Strasberg or Uta Hagen or whoever. But, it's a fast-paced society. More of an organic, instinctive, intuitive approach is helpful in terms of the quick turnaround, not having all the time to do the heavy work that they teach in a lot of drama schools. And also know that a lot of those techniques came from Russia. It came from a time of serious oppression. Speech was oppressed, everything in society. And the actors were very introverted, so they had to do a lot of deeply emotional. They didn't live in a free society like we do. Although there are people who will probably argue that out there. They didn't grow up in America. They didn't grow up in Western culture. So for us to study their techniques, I think we're already fairly open and expressive. And that's most people who are drawn to this is because they have something to communicate as artists. I think they're better off spending their time learning how to use their instincts and trust themselves and their impulse, their imagination, and intuition, and knowing how to do that in real time so they can pick up a script and make it as real to them as anything they've ever said in their life. And if you can do that, you can work as an actor. Everything else, I could walk and talk and crawl around on the floor and pretend to be an animal, or think about my dying cat, or do emotional release work and get tools and push on my psoas muscle and have a big emotional release. I could do that forever. It doesn't mean I'm going to be a good actor. But if I can take a script and I can breathe into that and start to speak with you, just like we've been talking through this whole interview without changing, so that we could be talking and all of a sudden I say, I know you're going to go. I know it, and I've been thinking a lot about what you said, that she gives you something. I think that's what you said, right? And I can just go from life into the piece and in and out, and I can do that seamlessly. You can work as an actor. That's part of the gift I think that Brando would do, and he gave us. He would talk to actors and say, just start rolling the camera. And they'd have conversations, and all of a sudden the actress would be looking at him and she'd be like, that sounds familiar what he's saying right now. Oh, wait, he's doing the script. Oh, he's doing the scene. And then she would respond with the line, and then in the end, Josh Logan would say, all right, I think we got it. And she'd be like, oh my gosh. And it's like seeing acting as a continuation of life. You're already alive. If you can trust that you are real by the sheer virtue of the fact that you are living, then the doorway opens to possibilities of what can happen that's interesting for an audience. If you're thinking about how to play a scene and all these overly interesting choices to be interesting, we're going to see an actor trying to be clever and working for that. But if we see, like, back to what your point about those casting directors, if we see you, but with this script and how this script fits you, it'll be bent to the character because the writing's going to take care of more than you can imagine. The writing, Tennessee Williams' writing isn't going to provoke the same things as Aaron Sorkin. Aaron Sorkin's not going to provoke the same things as David Mamet. It's going to sound different coming out of your mouth, off your tongue. It's going to make your body feel different, and the character will look different. Maybe it'll be a version of whoever, Martin Benson, if you were an actor. It'll be a version of Martin, but it'll be a little different, and that's what I try to really impart to actors, is to trust that they're enough, that you're already interesting. And, if this is something you want to do, if you're not already a professional actor, or if you are, obviously that's the beginning of talent. And then it's for us to help you cultivate that as coaches, to get out of your own way like a good golf pro would, and tell you, you're holding the club too tight, just breathe, or your shoulder's coming up. Just think about a feeling of ease when you hit the next stroke. You got this, that sort of thing. And then you go, yeah, I can do this. It's easier than I thought. Most actors overcomplicate things. James Gandolfini said they get an audition, 35 different wigs and 20 ties, and they're wondering, and then he said he would go to Harold Guskin, and Harold would say, just stop, breathe, and just talk to me. And he would do it and he'd go, okay, it's as simple as that? Yes, it is as simple as that. And then shit will come for the character, and all right, now let's put the tie on, let's put the wig in,
I literally just recorded a podcast the other day on the importance of simplifying stuff. Like you try to layer all these things, and you'll read the character description, like, how can I include every single thing that's written in here? It's like, don't think that you just do the script.
That's great. That's great advice, Martin. And I don't think they're, like, back to Richard Hicks, they're not looking for the perfect take. They're really not. Sometimes a flawed take is the best thing to turn. For the Tyler Perry show that I'm recurring on, I think I did 1.5 takes, which usually I'll do an average of 2 to 3, but I did 1.5 takes, and I almost shot a second. I say 1.5 because I started and I think I screwed up a line really early on and I cut it. And then we went back. And so then I really did 1 full take. And I looked at it, and the person who was helping me tape was like, I think it was great. And I was saying, oh, well, but did this fit this for the breakdown? And did I seem this enough? Or did I seem too sympathetic and not smarmy enough? And I said to George, stop it. If you do it again, you're going to start directing yourself into what you think they want. This is what spit out of you that was raw when the camera was rolling. This is what gushed and gurgitated out when you cut the vein open. All right? It's raw, it's unplanned, it's unexpected. It is what it is. You had some choices and your instincts took care of the rest. It's messy. So what? Turn that in. And I turned it in. 3 months later, I found that I got the booking. And it's really a good, often we do sometimes, very often our first take ends up being our best because it's not perfect and it's raw, and there's an uncomfortable kind of edge to it that leads to something spontaneous that's interesting.
I was literally covering that thing, just basically this in another episode. I just recorded like a whole bunch of podcast episodes yesterday and the day before. And so in one of them, I was talking about this, like, as you're recording different takes and stuff, and you kind of get towards the end or whatever, and you're happy with it, then go back and watch the first one, because a lot of times the first one will be better. But what's interesting is when you compare them, you might actually learn something too, like looking like, why is this one so much more natural and stuff? And sometimes like new things might occur to you that you can kind of use in the future. But yeah, the first take, it's just I like that. Um, so we've kind of talked about this, in terms of like valuable pieces of advice here, the belief that it is very much about talent, and that, you also have to believe that an opportunity will arise, which you're just talking about. But my last question, maybe it's the same answer, or maybe you have something that you want to add, which the last final question I have here is, do you have any final words of advice or encouragement for actors who are listening to this, but might be feeling stuck right now in their careers?
I understand, and I can certainly empathize and relate to feeling stuck. I felt that way personally for a long period of time. especially with the audition process. As I said, it can be very frustrating to get opportunities and not make the most of them, or not hear anything, or to feel like you're not getting opportunities, or you don't have the best agent and you're not getting out, or maybe your agent is great for other actors but not for you, and whatever. Um, you know, you do not know. Today could be the day that they say yes, that something changes. There is a luck factor. Harrison Ford said that it's like a wheel that's spinning around, and if you stay on it long enough, eventually your number is going to come up. And the best thing you can do for your happiness and your art is to stay creatively satisfied, to stay engaged, to stay active, whether that's producing your own projects, but getting as many opportunities as you can to get better at what you do. Going back to what you said, reference I might repeat. Um, you have to focus on your craft and being good and being the best actor you can be. You only have two things you can control. One is learning the lines, and the second is your ability to take action. And if you were able to do that and do that regularly in a way that's, as I said before, that doesn't look like acting, but that's free and that's on your instinct, and you're sort of doing it more for yourself than for the outcome, you're going to see a lot of things are going to start to shift your way. And certainly, if you want to be and create your own projects, you should do that too. And don't let anybody, like, I've said that to filmmakers and they're like, well, even screenwriting is 4 years in a university and an MFA, or 3 years. That's a whole nother thing in a craft. And they're not wrong, but there are plenty of actors, going back to the person I was fortunate enough to work for his company this year, Taylor Sheridan, who created Yellowstone. He was an actor. And it's a very famous story. The guy finally got his dream of being a series regular on Sons of Anarchy. And then the second season, they weren't going to pay him any more money. And he had a wife and 2 kids and was living in Los Angeles and couldn't sustain everything, and made a decision that he didn't feel he was going to move up in the way that he deserved or wanted to leave and go take a job managing a ranch and write scripts. He said he'd read enough of them and he felt something in him said, I can write, even though he wasn't a trained writer and didn't go to UCLA or whatever for screenwriting, I believe. And the first 2 things he writes and his acting agent helps him sell them. And one was Sicario and Hell and High Water, both, I think, nominated for the Academy Award. And then he gets his own series or whatever. I mean, that's an extreme example, but no one should stop you from trying to do what you want to do, ever. Like, be careful about who you take advice from, even like me. What do I know? I mean, challenge everything. But if you want to do something and it's in your heart and you're passionate about it, do it, and do it with fervor and tenacity and vigor, and don't stop. And the better you get, the more you're going to want to do it, the more you're going to want to do it. Obviously, the better you are going to get. But do know that, like, there's a difference between practice and perfect practice, as Vince Lombardi said, famous coach of the Green Bay Packers. You could practice all day long, and if you're doing some of the stuff that we talked about, your tapes aren't going to get results. So you got to work with, hopefully some teachers or a coach, that can help you see what's missing here. My feeling again is, if someone's getting 20 auditions and they haven't heard anything, I want to see their self-tape. I want to take a look at it. If someone's on set and they're continually getting these type of roles and not moving up and getting bigger speaking parts or whatever, or whatever, there's something about their process that needs to be debugged. And that's where I would want to help and pull it apart.
Yeah. No, I think that that's very, very good long-term advice. It's totally true. There's so many people who build great careers and they didn't have all the formalized education and training and stuff. I mean, yeah, if you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer, you definitely probably should go in the more formal direction if you don't want to get into trouble. But in other industries, I mean, it's especially in acting, you definitely don't need so much training. I mean, as you said earlier, we all naturally have the instincts that are needed. And a lot of the times it's just kind of getting out of your own head and living in the character, and then just kind of being consistent moving forward over time. And I actually did a podcast. I don't remember which episode it is, but it's way earlier, like probably one of the first like 20 or 30 episodes, on how to kind of talk to family and friends who don't support your acting career, which may be a interesting topic if anybody is struggling with that. But yeah, I mean, if you have a passion for something, you shouldn't let people hold you back. I love that advice.
I would like to hear that podcast. That's important. Yeah. It's really, especially for any artist, like it does kind of take a village. And, you know, yeah, you can work and prove the naysayers wrong, but it's a lot easier if you have some support, unquestionably. And, but even whatever it is somebody wants to do in life, like they could want to start trading stocks in the stock market. I don't know. And somebody will tell them, well, it takes a year and this, that, and you're better off doing this and don't bother wasting your time. And it's too complicated. Everything is hard, is challenging. Everything is going to be hard. Would you rather struggle doing something you love and that you're really interested in, or struggle doing something that you hate?
Yeah.
If you want to do something, the quickest way to get derailed and to kill a dream is by starting to tell everybody that you have a dream, and then you hear naysayers telling you, including, and look at that person who's telling you this too, not to be rude, but if they haven't made a gazillion dollars, let's say buying gold and commodities, and they're telling you don't get into gold and do futures, that's because they failed at that. Find somebody who's succeeded at that or is succeeding and talk to them, or who's trained people who are succeeding. You know, there's also another thing. And like, because before I was working heavily as an actor, I had this insecurity in my mind, like, oh, should I be coaching? I'm not famous. You know, as an actor, I'm still an actor. I'm not one of these retired teachers who's, you know, I'm still actively pursuing acting. So should I be coaching? Why are they going to pay me and not go see somebody who's an A-list star that teaches a class once a year or whatever? And, you know, a track coach could be an Olympic track coach who's 70 years old. That doesn't mean he's going to be running the track and competing against, you know, the fastest person in the world. Yeah. So sometimes there are people who maybe didn't have the greatest careers or aren't the best at what they do, but who are really good coaches. And vice versa. There can be someone who is a brilliant actor, but who doesn't know how to articulate and communicate what they do to a student, to a prospective student, and doesn't understand you and what makes you tick and the individual. So you have to be really careful about taking advice and, you know, speak to people who I think entrepreneurs, surprisingly, are, no matter how successful they are more supportive of artists than somebody who's a regular 9-to-5 corporate person who works for a company. You could talk to somebody who's an accountant, but he built his own business from scratch, and you talk to him about what you want to do, and he will support you and give you good, sound business advice and be a fan. You could talk to somebody else who works for a big accounting firm, and they'll say, what are you going to do to support your family and get a real job? And why haven't we seen you on TV this Christmas when you come home for dinner, you know, every year? And you're like, what do I do with that? So you know, that entrepreneurial mindset is really important for anyone to have that's an artist, because you are an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Well, hopefully people who are listening to this do feel inspired if they're feeling stuck. There's plenty of things that can be worked on, but as we said, we talked about numbers that you can kind of start to look towards improving, and things that you can take to, you know, tactical things that you can take into auditions and self-tapes and all of that. So this has been extremely helpful. I hope that if anybody does have a question and they're watching this on YouTube, you feel free to leave comments below. I'm going to personally be reading some of the comments and responding to any that I can. And, you know, George, you'll have the link. And if you're open to responding occasionally, if people do have questions, maybe we can do another episode. But this is amazing. How can actors get in touch with you, whether they have questions about your coaching program or anything else? We talked about your Facebook stuff, but, you know, email, website, or any other stuff that you want to share.
Yeah, that's actually my preference and the best way to get into contact with me, just because I'm not always, I try to jump on the social media stuff frequently, but I don't necessarily monitor that personally as closely as I do my emails. You can email through the website, theactorsinstinct.com, www.theactorsinstinct.com, or just write to me, George@theactorsinstinct. Please put in, you know, the attention, you know, where you saw me or heard about me, and just so I have some reference so it doesn't get lost. Obviously, it's if they reference Martin Benson's podcast, I'll have a better context, and it'll kind of move up the pipe in terms of getting a response.
So, George, this is excellent. People can definitely reach out to you. Do you have any info that you want to share on upcoming programs or anything that people can join?
Yeah, so we just started interviewing for our fall program. It's going to be the last one that we're doing this year. It's a 3-month, 90-day intensive. And we're going to be covering a lot of what I talked about today, the Actor's Instinct approach, which is very different from, you know, what I think a lot of traditional training programs offer in acting studios. It's really a deep dive into understanding how to be free, how to use your instincts and your intuition to not act, to do work that's very real and very organic, and I think a lot quicker in terms of the workflow that you establish. We have accountability. I mean, we're giving regular assignments, both in terms of scene work, training, helping them obviously prep and then progress towards the end, towards auditions. But it's real nuts and bolts training for actors at every level. If they need to move the needle in their work, if you're stuck at the co-star level and you haven't booked a guest star, or you're doing guest stars but you're not getting recurring and that sort of thing, or series regulars. And I have a team of other acting coaches that come in, and sometimes we'll tag team in a class. We do little small cohorts, so it's highly competitive. We interview actors. I might spend 30 minutes just interviewing each potential candidate. So they're welcome to reach out, George at theactorsinstinct.com, and let them know, that they heard me on this podcast and a little bit about their acting background. And I want to get to know you. If you're an actor who's stuck or you need more help and you aren't sure how to navigate, and this speaks to you, then I want to know you. I want to know who you are.
And if someone just so happens to find this video and it's past that deadline, are there more enrolling opportunities as well, potentially?
So potentially down the program, I try to schedule them really based on my availability, because I also work as an actor and it depends on projects I have throughout the year. But we do have a community.
Email and reach out and find out.
Yeah, email. You can find out, for any upcoming dates, and if not, what else we could do in the interim to maybe support you.
Well, cool. This was amazing. I can't thank you enough for joining me.
Yeah, my pleasure, man.
We'll be able to do this again in sometime in the future and focus on more things. There's so many questions out there, but you've done a really good job answering many of them today. So thank you.
Thanks, man. They're great questions. Thanks for putting this together and for doing this.
Well, thanks for listening. Now, if you found the podcast helpful, I would really appreciate if you could take a minute to leave a review, as doing so helps other actors find this podcast too. Just go to ratethispodcast.com/actor success. Thanks so much, and I'll see you soon.